Hi everyone, welcome back. Alright, today we are going to talk about incidental vocabulary learning and why exposure to language is a major driver of vocabulary development for both first language learners and second language learners. This topic matters because many people believe that vocabulary learning comes primarily from memorizing lists, drills, or explicit teacher explanations. Research shows that something very different. Most vocabulary is learned incidentally through repeated exposure in meaningful communication. Let's start with first language acquisition. Children do not begin life studying vocabulary with flashcards. They absorb words through constant interactions with parents, caregivers, and the surrounding environment. By the time they enter school, children already understand roughly 4 to 5,000 words without ever intentionally learning them. This growth happens because they hear words repeatedly in different contexts. They hear verbs during daily routines, nouns during story time, adjectives during emotional situations, and so on. Their brain gradually refines meaning through exposure, not through formal instruction. As children grow older, literacy dramatically accelerates vocabulary learning. Once a child can read independently, printed text becomes one of the most powerful sources of new vocabulary. Unlike speech, which is often predictable and limited in variety, books include more sophisticated language academic expressions and less frequent vocabulary. This is why children who read regularly develop larger vocabularies than children who rarely read. The process does not stop after childhood. Educated adults typically know around 10 to 13,000 word families, and that number continues to grow across the lifespan. Adults add around 6,000 new words between ages 20 and 60. That equals roughly one new word every 2 days. Now, let's turn to second language learners. A common myth is that incidental vocabulary learning is something that only happens effectively in a first language. The evidence contradicts that assumption. Although learners can acquire vocabulary incidentally at a similar rate if they receive enough exposure. The main difference between native and non-native speakers is not ability. It is assessed input. Native speakers have years of constant exposure before school, while many second language learners don't. Reading plays a crucial role here as well, but incidental learning requires repetition. A learner may notice a new word once, but memory is weak unless reinforced. To truly learn a formulaic expression, for example, makes sense, learners need 10 to 15 meaningful encounters in context. Saying a word 10 times may help recognition, but using it correctly in speech or writing requires even more practice. This is why extensive reading long text for interest is more effective than short school tests designed only for comprehension questions. Longer reading provides natural repetition without boredom. Teacher support influences the effectiveness of extensive reading. First, students need suitable reading material. Throwing learners into books that are too difficult only produce frustration and failure. Graded readers allow learners to build vocabulary step by step before moving to authentic text. Second, glossing and vocabulary support help learners notice new words without interrupting reading flow. Third, post-reading tasks such as summaries and discussions recycle vocabulary and strengthen retention. And finally, the best outcomes appear when incidental exposure is combined with explicit instruction rather than treated as two separate approaches. Now, let's consider listening. Historically, vocabulary research has focused more on reading than listening, but modern studies shows that listening can also result in incidental vocabulary acquisition. Its effectiveness depends on several factors: the number of exposure to the target word, whether learners receive opportunities for interaction and clarification, and whether they hear the word in acoustically varied context, meaning different speakers, different speeds, and different settings. Listening alone still tends to be less efficient than reading unless reinforced through repeated exposure and follow-up activities. A major development in vocabulary learning research involves audiovisual input. Television shows, movies, YouTube, or short online clips. Audiovisual content supports learning because visuals provide context clues and subtitles connect the spoken and written forms of a word. Learners who engage with subtitled material acquire more vocabulary than those who watch without subtitles. Of course, there are individual differences based on vocabulary size, the similarity of new words to the learner's first language, and the frequency of the word within the medium. Beyond formal learning, incidental acquisition continues through what we call extramural exposure. Gaming, watching subtitled content, listening to English songs, interacting with online communities, and reading English voluntarily. These activities provide sustained contact with the language and benefit not only high-achieving students but also average students, sometimes dramatically more than classroom instruction alone. In conclusion, incidental vocabulary learning is driven by repeated exposure through reading, listening, audiovisual content, and real-world interaction. Explicit study helps, but exposure is what builds long-term vocabulary growth for both first and second language learners. The key is not memorizing more, it is experiencing more language.